The sound of bones snapping echoed louder than the alarms. For a moment the entire orbital prison froze in silence, watching the human, barely 6 feet tall, unarmored, unaugmented, drop a Galactic Warden to his knees. Commander Jack Harlow, Navy SEAL turned reluctant envoy, stared down at the alien giant clutching his shattered arm. His voice cut through the stunned crowd, calm and sharp as a blade. "I told you not to shove me." The gasps from 100 alien throats filled the hall. Some were horrified, some delighted, but all knew this would not end quietly. That was the moment the galaxy learned what happened when you shoved a SEAL. The trouble had started only a few hours earlier, when Jack set foot on Orbital Station Europhaean, the most feared correctional outpost in 3-star systems. He had been warned Earth's allies did not exactly trust humans with diplomacy, so sending him, a soldier with scars in places most people did not even know could scar, was a gamble. But Jack had a way of getting respect. Sometimes with words, often with fists. As he walked through the steel corridors of the station, the scent of ozone mixed with disinfectant stung his nose. He muttered to himself that it smelled like an airport bathroom mated with a nuclear submarine. No one laughed, because no one understood. The guards around him were 12 feet tall, armored, and deadly serious. But Jack kept smirking, because smirking was his armor. The first real conflict came in the cafeteria. Imagine 100 different species trying to cook their own comfort food and then throwing it all into one industrial kitchen. The result was an array of dishes that steamed, hissed, or actively crawled across trays. Jack poked at something gelatinous that blinked at him and muttered, "I miss Taco Bell." That earned him a confused glare from a reptilian cook who hissed that the meal was made from the rare organs of a sand leviathan. Jack deadpanned, "Back home we'd call that Mystery Meat Tuesday." A few prisoners chuckled. The wardens did not. It was in that moment Warden Kryvax made his move. Kryvax was not just any guard, he was massive even by warden standards, a walking slab of bone and muscle wrapped in glistening armor. He had been waiting for the chance to put the human in his place. As Jack carried his tray across the hall, Kryvax stepped in front of him. The entire room grew quiet, sensing the impending storm. Without a word, Kryvax shoved Jack square in the chest. The tray clattered to the ground. Strange fluids and chunks of alien cuisine splattered across the deck. Gasps and laughs rippled through the crowd. For the wardens, it was a dominance ritual, a reminder of who ruled this station. For Jack, it was just another idiot trying to start a bar fight. Jack did not react right away. He bent down, picked up the tray, and inspected the alien's sludge dripping down his boots. He sighed. "You know, where I'm from, when someone ruins a man's lunch, they usually say sorry." Kryvax sneered, towering over him, flexing armor-plated shoulders. "You are not a man here. You are prey." He shoved Jack again, harder this time, trying to make him stumble back. Instead, Jack set the tray aside, straightened his posture, and locked eyes with the warden. His voice dropped low. "Last warning, big guy. Keep your hands to yourself." The crowd leaned forward. Nobody spoke. Even the food stopped hissing. Kryvax roared with laughter, a booming sound that rattled the walls. Then he shoved again, putting all his weight into the motion. That was when Jack moved. His hand shot out, faster than anyone expected, and twisted Kryvax's massive wrist into a lock that strained tendons. Before the alien could react, Jack torqued the arm backward with precision born of 100 missions in hostile territory. The crack was sharp, final, brutal. Kryvax howled as his arm bent the wrong way, armor snapping like brittle twigs. Jack released him, letting the giant collapse to one knee, clutching his ruined limb. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence. Then voices erupted all at once, some shouting in outrage, others cheering wildly. A prisoner with tentacles waved them like pom-poms. Another banged his tray in rhythm like a drum. The wardens leapt forward, but Kryvax snarled at them to stop, his pride refusing any show of weakness. He glared up at Jack with hate blazing in his compound eyes. Jack leaned close enough for only him to hear. "I didn't come here looking for a fight, but you better believe I'll finish one. Then he straightened, calm as if nothing had happened, and muttered to himself, "And that's why you never shove a seal." The alarms blared before anyone could react further. Red lights pulsed across the cafeteria walls. An automated voice thundered in 3 different languages that security protocols had been breached. Jack froze, instincts kicking in. The timing was too perfect. He wondered if the alarm was about him, or if something worse was brewing. Around him, prisoners and guards scrambled, the chaos swallowing the room. Vela, a sly-eyed smuggler Jack had noticed watching from the corner, smirked at him through the pandemonium. She mouthed one word, "Interesting." As wardens rushed to restore order, Jack stood still in the center of it all, calm while the world spun around him. He had seen this before, in combat zones where the first bullet turned order into madness. He knew one thing for certain: breaking Kryvax's arm was not the end of trouble. It was only the beginning. Somewhere deep in his gut, Jack felt the weight of what he had just done. He had humiliated a warden, maybe even the wrong warden. That kind of act did not get forgotten. It sparked vendettas, wars, rebellions. He exhaled slowly, like he always did before things went from bad to worse. He whispered under his breath, "This is going to get ugly." And then, with alarms still howling and Kryvax seething in the shadows, Jack Harlow realized he had just declared war on the most dangerous guardians in the galaxy. The mess hall looked like a riot that had put on a uniform and decided to act respectable. Wardens with stunned faces tried to look stern again, while drones zipped overhead and sprayed antiseptic mist that smelled like burned mint. Kryvax refused a stretcher and stalked out with his broken arm bound to his chest, eyes promising a future with fewer of my bones intact. Prisoners watched me the way sailors watch a hurricane on the horizon, impressed for a second then busy calculating where the wind would blow next. I kept my hands loose and my face blank. If there is one thing the teams teach you, it is how to look calm while your head runs a full-scale invasion plan. A pair of wardens in slate armor escorted me down a corridor ribbed with cables like tendons. Neither spoke. Their footfalls hit the deck in perfect rhythm, a metronome of menace. At the end of the hall the doors irised open and the pressure in my ears shifted as we entered an observation chamber with a ceiling like a star chart. A semicircle of high seats waited above a single chair in the middle of the floor. I knew a stage when I saw one. The chair was for me, and the audience had already bought popcorn. They did not tell me to sit, so I did not. The council arrived in silence, figures out of a bestiary, armored and robed and carrying authority like a weapon. An older warden with silvered carapace plates stepped forward and regarded me as if I were a malfunctioning tool. "You broke Kryvax," she said, voice amplified by the room. The words bounced off the walls and came back sounding like a verdict. I replied that he had shoved me 3 times, and where I come from we consider 3 to be enough warnings. Her mouth plates clicked in what I later learned was dry amusement. The others did not look amused. They debated with each other as if I were a specimen on a dish. One argued I should be spaced to preserve order. Another noted that Earth was a signatory to a fragile trade lane accord and killing the envoy might spawn more than outrage. A third suggested a public trial by contest. He called it evaluation. I call all such proposals a fancy way to say fight for your life while we sell tickets. I stood in the center and let them talk. I could feel my pulse in my right wrist, slow and steady like it had learned long ago that panic wastes oxygen. When they asked if I had anything to say in my defense, I gave them the truth stripped for parts. I did not come to start trouble. I did not come because I wanted to be here at all. Someone senior on Earth had decided that a man who could keep a clear head in bad places might help open doors with people who only respect strength. I told them I would respect their laws while aboard, but I would not let any creature put hands on me again. That earned a ripple through the chamber, surprise and offense stirring together like oil and water. The elder warden spoke again. "You will be contained until a verdict is reached." The containment wing of Eurofean tried to be humane the way a shark tooth tries to be smooth. My cell held a slab that pretended to be a bed, a wall slot that dispensed water with a hint of tin, and a viewport slit that offered a postcard of the dying star. Its surface boiled with slow storms. I sat on the slab and rolled my shoulders and replayed the mess hall from shove to snap. There had been a moment before the alarms when the room inhaled as one and I felt the pivot of 100 fates. A shove is not just a shove in a place like this. It is a test, a message, a challenge carved into muscle memory across species. Night cycles on the station were a lie told by lights. After a while the door chuffed and slid back and Vela leaned against the frame with a smile that said she had keys to rooms no one else could even see. She wore the prison jumpsuit as if it were a choice, sleeves rolled, a loop of wire tucked behind one ear. "You cause a lot of paperwork," she said. I told her I was trying to improve the local customer service. She laughed softly and sauntered in without asking. "You could have begged," she said, and meant it as a probe. I told her I had tried that technique once, back when I was 10, and it did not play well in my neighborhood. She perched on the edge of the slab and glanced at the viewport star. "The wardens love a spectacle," she said. "Break their spectacle and they break you." Then she tilted her head and studied me like a code she might learn to read. "Your hands," she said. "Not many people could do what you did to Kryvax through that armor. Earth training goes deep." I shrugged. Muscle knows what you teach it to know. Mine knows when to tell muscle to shut up. She grinned and low light caught the right side of her face where an old scar had learned to be pretty. "You surprised the room," she said. "Especially him." The way she said him shivered the air. I asked the obvious, and she did not answer right away. Instead she told me who ate with who, which gangs traded favors, who bribed which guards, and which corridors to avoid if I wanted to keep all my vital fluids inside. She said the wardens had managed to run an empire by pretending to run only a prison. Every shipment, every transfer, every favor paid in a currency of fear. As she talked she traced an idle circle on the slab with a fingertip. Then she dropped it. "Kryvax is not just a guard. He is an heir." The air seemed to lose a couple degrees. I let the sentence sit until it settled. "Heir to what?" I asked, though my gut had already put 2 and 2 together and written the answer in thick black marker. "The Supreme Warden," Vela said, and watched my face for a flinch. "He is the chosen successor. Snap the arm of the next ruler, and you do not embarrass a man. You insult a throne." She stood and rolled the wire between her fingers as if it were a coin. "The alarms were not for fun. They were to keep the room from tearing you apart in the first 30 seconds. The first sound I heard in the arena was not cheering or jeering but the steady pulse of machinery. Metal walls groaned as giant plates slid into place, sealing me inside a bowl big enough to fit a football stadium. A haze of dust hung in the air from vents high above, filtering the dim light into streaks that looked almost holy if you ignored the fact that every creature in the stands was waiting to see me die. Wardens filled the upper tiers, their armor glinting, while prisoners crowded into lower seats, hungry for blood and entertainment. I could feel their eyes pressing down on me, a weight heavier than the armor I was not allowed to wear. This was no trial. It was spectacle dressed as justice, and I was the center act. A booming voice declared the terms. "The human envoy, guilty of assaulting a ranking warden, will be tested for worthiness." The word tested was dragged out like honey over a knife's edge. 3 stages, each worse than the last. If I survived, they would consider letting me live. Consider. I rolled my shoulders and breathed in slow, the way we were trained to do before a mission drop. Fear never goes away, but it can be trained to wait its turn. The first opponent stalked into view as gates opened across the sand floor. A beast with 4 legs, scales that shone like wet oil, and a mouth full of serrated teeth bigger than my fingers. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. The crowd hissed with delight as it sniffed the air and locked on me. They called it a Charik. I called it Tuesday. When I was stationed in the Gulf, we wrestled gators out of swamps for training drills. A gator does not have 4 legs armed with spikes, but the principle felt close enough. The creature charged, tail whipping behind like a hammer. I did not run. Running makes predators chase harder. I waited until it lunged, then rolled left, and drove my boot into the side of its joint. It stumbled with a screech, claws sparking against the floor. I circled, keeping distance, looking for a weakness. Its armor was thick, but its belly was softer, Another charge, another roll. This time I found a shard of metal buried in the sand, a broken piece of some earlier match. I wrapped it in cloth from my jumpsuit and gripped it like a knife. When it lunged again, I planted the shard deep into its underside and twisted. The chariot howled, spun, then collapsed, writhing until it went still. I backed away, breathing hard, blood soaking the shard. The crowd went wild, some booing, some roaring. To them it was entertainment. To me it was survival. The second stage followed before I had even caught my breath. Two opponents emerged this time, humanoid but taller than me, their bodies wrapped in chains that glowed with blue fire. Prisoners, modified and enslaved for combat, their minds drowned by drugs. Their eyes were glassy but their bodies moved with deadly purpose. They carried staffs tipped with energy blades, humming like angry bees. This fight was not about monsters but about testing how I handled intelligent foes. I had trained for worse. I remembered close-quarters combat drills in ship corridors, fighting men twice my size in the dark. The principle was always the same. Move first. Move fast. Vela came to my cell at a false dawn when the lights softened just enough to make the steel look almost friendly. She spoke like a woman ordering coffee, casual and fast, as if the proposition were routine. "We are leaving," she said, "not a week from now, not after another round of council games, but soon." I asked the only question that mattered. "Where?" She smiled and tapped the wall by the vent. "Through the spine. The core is a maze, yes, but a predictable one, and I have a path." I told her predictable was my favorite kind of impossible. The spine was a legend even among prisoners who had never seen it. Every station has a heart, and Euriphaean hid hers behind layers of heat and doctrine. Vela sketched lines in the air with a finger, as if the corridors were only waiting to appear. We slip into maintenance shafts, we take a lift designed for drones, we pass 3 security nodes while Kiro spoofs their appetite for clean data, and we arrive at the edge of the core. "There is a service bridge," she added, barely audible, and I knew that translation meant a plank with an attitude problem. I asked who Kiro was and she said the kid with the bright eyes and the smart fingers, the one who vanishes like smoke. "Good eyes," I said, and she laughed because compliments pay better than credits. We met Kiro in a service crawl that smelled like hot copper and old dust. He could not have been more than 19 by Earth years, hair in ragged waves, a grin that tried to be tough and settled for honest. He showed me a chip he had machined from scrap and bragged that it could convince a door that it was a wall, or a wall that it was a door, depending on his mood. He spoke in a rhythm that reminded me of young communications specialists back home, the ones who could make satellites dance while eating noodles from a cup. I liked him immediately and decided not to let him know that, because confidence needs to learn how to carry its own weight. Rux arrived late, the deck plate thudding with each step. He was insected in the broadest sense, a towering figure of chitin and sinew with a face that could scowl in 3 directions at once. He considered me as if appraising a chair that might, or might not hold. "So this is the human who breaks airs," he said in a voice that felt like gravel poured through a drum. I told him I preferred gentle negotiation. He clicked something that might have been laughter, and said he had been assigned to waste processing for insubordination but was currently on personal time due to a clerical error he had caused on purpose. Vela rolled her eyes and told me Rux was loyal as long as loyalty remained amusing. The plan took shape over a stolen meal where the bread tasted like memory foam. We would move during a shift change when the wardens rotated patrols around the council chamber due to an inspection. Kiro would ride the maintenance network while we moved in meat space, feeding us unlocks and illusions. Rux would carry the heavy gear in my unconscious body if necessary, though he preferred to throw me instead, more efficient that way. Vela would handle doors that did not respect polite requests. I would manage anything with a pulse and a weapon and the kind of pride that makes people step forward when they should step back. I asked about Kryvax and Vela admitted he would have spies sniffing for any draft in the air. Then she smiled like a blade. "Let him sniff," she said. "We will just move faster." We entered the shafts under cover of a cleaning drone convoy. Kiro slipped a filter over the lead unit and convinced it to accept us as dust in need of removal. I squeezed through tunnels that wanted to shrink, lungs working hard in the stale air, ribs aching from the sentinel fight. Rux hauled a pack that looked like it wanted to become a building. Vela led, one hand brushing cables as if she were reading a text hidden in the metal. At the first node, Kiro stopped and tapped into a port no bigger than a thumbnail. Lines of numbers flickered across a wafer screen. He grinned. "They are using an old handshake," he said. "Like they left the keys under the mat." I told him not to get cocky, and he said he had been born that way. The lift for drones was a tight metal throat with no patience for flesh. We crammed inside, and Kiro made it think we were 30 kilograms of spare bearings. As it dropped, the floor vibrated in a way that reminded me of helicopter rides over hot zones, that steady buzz that tells you the world is about to get very interesting. Vela checked a wristband she had stolen 2 months ago and whispered times to herself. Rux stood still, every muscle sleeping with one eye open. I took the moment to catalog how many choices had brought me here, from the first shove to the last gate, and felt the strange lightness that comes when you finally stop pretending you can negotiate with the storm. The doors parted onto a catwalk above a cavern of machinery. The spines stretched before us in tiers of conduits and spinning vanes, a cathedral built from heat and pressure. Air shimmered. Light bled from the core in steady pulses, like a sea creature breathing. We moved along the catwalk while Kiro hummed to keep his nerves from eating themselves. Twice Vela froze us with a hand raised as drones swept by, their lenses searching for anomalies. At the second sweep, a lens hung on me a fraction too long, and something inside my chest clenched. Then Kiro whispered and the drone drifted on, convinced we were just reflections. The kid was better than good. He was dangerous to both sides. Halfway to the service bridge, a shadow peeled itself from a maintenance alcove and came at us with a blade made from broken plating. Rux stepped in and caught the attacker by the wrist, twisted, and set him down on the catwalk in one fluid motion that made the metal ring. The man gasped, and I saw the ink around his throat, marks of a gang Vela had named when she briefed me on politics. Vela crouched and spoke to him in a language that sounded like whispers in a storm. He spat at her and said we were walking into a funeral. Ours. She let him go and he ran. Rux said maybe he was right. I said maybe he had just earned us another minute by warning someone else, because every mercy has a price and sometimes the receipt arrives early. We reached the service bridge, and it was exactly the kind of plank I had feared. A narrow span across a shaft of heat and sound, no rails, nothing to love except the fact that it reached the other side. Vela went first, light on her feet, eyes forward. Kiro followed, arms held wide for balance, whispering jokes to himself about beaches he had never seen. Rux carried the pack and moved like a mountain, deciding to be polite. I stepped last, feeling the give under my boots. Halfway across, the lights dimmed and then flared. Alarms whispered through the metal. I grabbed the cable beside me and tasted electricity in the air. Kiro shouted that a patrol had tripped a flag we had not seen. We ran the rest of the span with the kind of focus that makes time a straight line. The chamber felt alive, its walls pulsing with the energy of the core, the air thick with static that made every hair on my arms stand on end. Vela's confession hung between us like smoke. She had not simply dragged us here for freedom. She had brought us to the heart of a weapon, something that could tilt the balance of entire wars. Kiro's hands trembled on the console, not from fear but from the sheer velocity of code moving through his mind. Rux shifted his weight and stared at the sealed door, claws flexing against the handle of the heavy pack, ready for anything that dared to enter. I stayed near Vela, watching the way she avoided my eyes while pretending to focus on the dials and switches. Lies weigh more than armor, and she had been carrying this one for a long time. The first sign of danger came as a ripple under my boots, a vibration not from the core but from feet pounding metal. The sound grew louder until it became a rhythm of war. Wardens were coming. They would not let anyone linger in this chamber for long, especially not after alarms had howled through half the station. Rux tilted his head, listening with the patience of a predator. Too many, he said simply, and set the pack down to unfold its contents. Out spilled lengths of chain, a shard cannon built from stolen parts, and a piece of plating shaped into a crude shield. He offered me a bar of reinforced steel as tall as my arm. Use it, he said, not as advice but as an order. I gripped it and found it surprisingly balanced, like a makeshift spear. Vela cursed under her breath as the gate's course shifted from pulsing steady to erratic, each surge brighter, faster. She whispered that the timing was wrong, that she had calculated a quiet cycle but someone had changed the sequence. Kiro glanced up and said only one name. Kryvax. It made sense. He had been waiting for a chance to drag me into his arena again, but this time without a crowd to protect me. His pride demanded it, and his hatred would not wait. The door exploded inward with a shower of sparks. Wardens stormed through, their armor gleaming, weapons already humming. At their front, Kryvax entered with his arms still bound in a brace, his face twisted into something between triumph and fury. He pointed at me and roared one word that every species understood. Mine! The room erupted. Rux met the first wave with the shield, knocking two back into the corridor, their weapons clattering. I lunged forward and drove the steel bar into the chest plate of another, twisting it free before the alien could fall. Kiro crouched low, slamming commands into the console, trying to lock doors behind us even as bullets of light sizzled past. Vela darted between consoles, using her knives to cut down those who came too close. For a moment, chaos held the balance. Kryvax cut through the fight like a storm through branches. He shoved his own soldiers aside, eyes locked on me. Every step he took thudded like a drumbeat. I met him halfway, the steel bar swinging against his braced arm. He deflected it with his shoulder and slammed his free hand into my chest. The impact sent me rolling across the floor. Pain flared in my ribs, but training kept me moving. I scrambled to my feet and charged again, stabbing the bar toward his abdomen. He twisted, caught the bar, and snapped it in two with raw strength. I found myself holding nothing but jagged ends. He grinned, teeth sharp with satisfaction. He wanted me broken, not dead, at least not yet. I dropped one piece of the bar and feinted with the other, stepping inside his guard. My fist connected with his jaw, the crunch satisfying, though his head barely moved. He swung his good arm and the blow sent me sprawling again. Around us, Rux bellowed and hurled a Warden over the console, smashing it to pieces. Kiro yelled that the gate was priming itself, that it would fire in minutes whether we wanted it to or not. Vela screamed that we had to hold the room. Kryvax and I ignored them all. This was not about the gate anymore. This was personal. He lunged, braced arm raised like a hammer. I sidestepped, grabbed it, and twisted. The brace cracked, metal snapping, and his roar filled the chamber. His pride refused to let him yield, but his body betrayed him. I slammed my knee into his midsection and shoved him backward into a console. Sparks flew. He came at me again, rage making him clumsy. This time I rolled under his swing and drove my shoulder into his bad side. He staggered, and I grabbed his wrist, twisting until bone met pressure it could not resist. With a sound that echoed louder than the alarms, his other arm broke. The chamber froze for a second. The heir of the Supreme Warden howled, both arms ruined, his pride shattered. I leaned close and whispered the same words I had in the mess hall. Never shove a seal. The station steadied after the last convulsion like a wounded animal catching breath, but the quiet was a lie. I could feel the change in the air the way sailors feel a storm before the first drop. The Supreme Warden would not announce himself with fanfare. He would arrive like gravity, already there by the time you noticed. Vela pressed two fingers to the wall as if listening to a heartbeat, and said the course cycles were shortening. Kiro stared at his wrist screen and murmured that something vast had entered the perimeter and bent every sensor toward obedience. Rux only shrugged and tightened the straps of the pack as if one more buckle might hold back a god. We moved through maintenance passages where paint had given up and metal showed its age. Rux scouted corners with the unhurried care of a hunter, while Kiro left little gifts in the walls, loops of code waiting to trip up patrols. I counted cameras and vents, making a map in my head. We reached a wide corridor that cut toward command, the floor polished by boots too proud to scuff, and stopped at the sight of a new guard line forming. Wardens spread into a shield wall, eyes forward, weapons ready, all of them oriented toward the far doors. Not for us. For him. I felt a steadier version of fear then, the kind that respects an opponent and sharpens your instincts instead of drowning them. The doors opened without ceremony. The Supreme Warden stepped through not as a giant so much as an inevitability. Taller than Kryvax, yes, armored in plates that drank the light, but it was the way the rest of the corridor adjusted its rhythm to match his stride that marked power. Sirens softened, weapons lowered without meaning to, conversation stopped as if the air did not have room for words. He surveyed the line with a glance, and it straightened into perfection. Then his gaze found the place where blood had dried on my collar, and it stayed there with mild curiosity, like a scientist considering a specimen that might bite. We fell back into the side passages while he advanced with his guard toward command. We needed leverage, not a head-on charge. Vela sketched the layout with the speed of a conjurer. Command sat on a ring above the core, encircled by redundancies and failsafes. She had spent years learning where the Wardens kept their keys, and she knew one truth that would matter now. Pride made them build a system only they could command. If we could turn their pride into our trigger, we could survive this day. Kiro nodded, eyes bright in the dim. He could reroute disaster into certainty if the right hand pressed the wrong seal. Rux volunteered to be the wall behind which we risked genius. We reached a service ladder that rose to a hatch 2 levels below command. The hatch was secured with a triple lock smart enough to resent my face. Kiro coaxed it open with a humming tune and a bypass he had no right to invent. We crept into a room full of silent consoles and cold chairs, an observation post abandoned during the chaos. Through a slit viewport we saw the command ring beyond, an arc of stations facing a central dais. The Supreme strode to that center, and laid one hand upon a pillar that drank his palm and bloomed to life. Command codes cascaded like a waterfall. Even from here I could feel the shift as the station chose a single voice to obey. This was the moment, and we were not ready to fight him on his field. So we changed the field. Kiro slid into a chair and tapped his way into the half-dead systems this room still controlled, aligning their last loyalties to a plan. Vela opened a panel and rewired a circuit that had never expected rebellion. Rux barred the door with a console and picked up a pipe that looked insulted to be used as a weapon. I watched the Supreme and remembered training about enemies who expect you to play by the obvious rules. He would purge radiation, vent sections, flood corridors with gas. He would use the station against us. So we offered him something he could not resist using. Kiro explained it as he worked, voice low and urgent. The core had taken damage that cascaded through control systems. A dormant routine existed for the worst case, a self-destruct that could collapse the ring and seal the core behind sacrificial bulkheads, preserving the gate memory while killing everything else. It could be armed only by the highest authority after verifying catastrophic contamination in specific sections. The routine had been hidden beneath 5 layers of pride and paranoia. We could not activate it, but we could convince him to hold the knife by the blade. Vela would make those sections look poisoned beyond hope. My job was simpler. I had to be loud enough to draw his attention exactly where we need.